we bought this property for $1,718. Okay. So I'm not saying that everybody had, necessarily wants to take on this big of a rehab or extensive, but really we're only putting about 40,000 into it. Okay. And so most investors, they get worried, about certain things. In this case, this actually had, structurally, exteriorly, it was sound. So we felt great about bidding on it. We got it at a great price, so it was very little risk, right? And we bought, so we bought for 1,700, and because we're using we're very systemized in our approaches of renovations and how we do it, it's going to sell for about 140,000. And it's not necessarily from luck, not from a hot market, but from repeatable systems built exactly for that kind of a deal. So here's the actual house when we got it. That's what it looked like. So we bought it because the main house was secure. There was definitely some water issues with the in this carport area, so the roof in the carport area needs some work. I'll show you that here in a minute. And in this particular, property, a lot of people may have passed on it, maybe not. When we bought it, actually the windows were boarded up, so we couldn't really see in there. And and it wasn't like a hidden gem. It wasn't like a simple renovation, but it's a very small property. It's about 1,200 square feet or 1,100 square feet. So no one else, raised their panel bought it. We got it at minimum bid. There was a little bit of fire damage in the kitchen, but it wasn't fire damage like there's holes in the roof. It wasn't, it definitely wasn't a tear down because it was secured, but that's what a lot of people may have thought, without doing further investigation. But because we did our research up front, we knew we were getting a good deal going in. And why we bought this, why others passed, the difference between, comes down to preparation, right? We had tax deed expertise. We understood the title risk, redemption periods, and how to evaluate the process. We had automated due diligence, process appointing comps, really getting proper repair costs, and you know, and got rid of all the red flags before we bid on it. And then and even so with this, you guys, we bought this without ever actually going to the property. We bought it remotely. We had someone bid on our behalf. We bought this property remotely. And there's certain things and tools, and some of you guys on this training might have some of these tools, like the construction management software that we use, where we have every scope of work, vendor, dollars, everything's tracked. And that way we have real confidence in our renovation process before we get started. And for some of you guys, some of you might end up wanting to come along with us. We about 6 times a year we take a small group of people to an auction and then actually take them through a renovation in markets that we're actually doing deals in, where we already have the teams established that you can take advantage of. And so there's things like that we do from time to time, but we do that more on a qualification basis. We only let so many people come along with us to that. We want to make sure, we're working with the most serious, but this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing. So, most investors and untrained, trained investors, they either make one, two mistakes. They assume that nothing needs to be done, or they minimize the construction, and they miss out on the details. And so you need to understand the distinction across between both of those scenarios. So what other investors saw was, hey, there could be a little bit of, the house is boarded up. It was in a remote location, which it really isn't. It's about an hour. Blytheville is about an hour outside of Memphis, Tennessee. So it's what we call a ripple market, as well as we had done our research and we know that there was a huge investment in distill plants there, about $2 billion recently. And so, housing needs are on the rise. We estimated maximum repairs, going into this. A lot of people say, hey, I don't have a local contractor, related local relationships. I don't know how permitting works and all these things. There's always excuses, guys. There's always excuses not to do things. But we knew the structure was that was strong. The exterior structure was sound, just based on the photos and the on-site inspection we had done beforehand. We got it so cheap that almost, you get a property that cheap for a couple grand, it's hard to lose on, right? And there's a strong demand in the area for property, especially renovated property. And so most of that was surface damage and other things. We did have to, change out some things, and I'll show you what happened. And a lot of times, as long as the structure is sound, properties can look worse than they actually are, And so again, we don't generally, we're not just going to jump on everything, but in some cases, like even in this case, we changed out the windows. We had to take out the sheetrock and do new sheetrock and do a bunch of things, fix the roof repairs. But we were able to repair the roof instead of change the whole roof, trim things back, everything else that way. And when we look at it, you know, we're able to, avoid triggering some of unnecessary permit triggers, keep the project moving along. Fortunately, this isn't a market that has really, fairly low, you know, fairly easy to get permits done as well. So we had to clean out the interior just because there was a fire in there. You can't leave any of the sheetrock. Remove all the insulation, remove the drywall. We had to clean up the cabinets and the flooring, inspect everything. But at the end of the day, we are using, we're able to utilize low cost labor versus expensive labor. We're paying 15 to 25 bucks an hour instead of 860, $120 an hour for the demolition, trash removal, site debris, landscaping, prep, materials, all the major stuff we're able to do pretty cheaply. And some things we had to use a little bit of skilled trades, but most of it we were able to keep the construction costs down. So our total construction cost is about $40,000 on this deal. It's like 39,000 and some change. And then plus the $1,718 we spent on it, we're into about 42 grand, and it'll sell for 140. So after realtor fees and all the other stuff, we'll want to make about $85,000 on this deal. And then, utilizing our software, we're breaking down every scope of work, everything that we're doing across the board, preventing, all that makes a big difference. And so, essentially, this is kind of what it looks like in numbers at the end of the day. And we're just about to pop this property on the market within the next 2 weeks, and we've only been renovating it for about 3 weeks now. So a little bit longer than 4 weeks, about 40 days, 45 days start to finish. And, we were able to get the materials, low cost label, we got electrical and plumbing done cheaply, and even replacing the HVAC in this case, as far as the condensers and things like that. Um, and then we just use our standardized kind of level one rehab, everything that we put into a level one rehab as far as the final interior finishes. Okay. So when we look at that, you know, when I look at a scenario like that, this is actually, let me show you, see if I can pull up some of that renovation. So, hold on, let's just bring it back up. 1 second here. So, I'll actually see if I can share some of these things with you, just so you guys can see what's going on. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. So this is that the house is actually on Main Street. So here's how it looks when we got it, right? The interior, it looks worse than it is though, oftentimes. So there was some of the fire damage areas up here in that kind of top area. You could see where we had to look at some things there. This is as we cleared it out. And once it was cleared out, there was a few boards, few things we need to replace, wherever there's anything burnt. Here, if you guys can see some of this. We had to take out even in a couple areas a little bit of flooring. Okay, so in a lot of ways, this was kind of a gut job. It was just such a small house. It didn't take that much to fix it. And then once we cleaned it up, here's where it started looking like this, right? And then we started putting it back together. So now it's all opened up. There was some problems with the roof. We've got the roof repairs done, as far as the carport and some of those areas. Here, this is the final repair on it. And then here's where it was at sheetrock. That's interesting, you guys. So now it's all cleaned up, everything's coming back together, as you can see there. And here's the roof before and after it was rehabbed. So there was some roof issues, but the whole roof wasn't bad. So we were able to go and clear that out, fix that, and repair that without necessarily have to change the entire roof. There's our construction crew on it. And we actually um, placed a lot of the windows and everything else as well. So all in all, this is gonna be a really nice house for the next buyer. Here's some of the new windows, new things on it. Here's when it got to tape and float, right? As far as now it's getting to the final stages. So next week they're putting the cabinets and finish work in, and it's pretty much gonna be all done. So, and we're able to get through it because it's a small rehab very quickly. So there's the new water heater, new things we're putting in there across the board. So when we talk about renovations, that that that's going to take us a total of about 6 weeks start to finish before it's back on the market. And if you're prepared going in, we bought it, then immediately we can start getting an inspection done, get contractors out there and get things moving. You could get in and out of these properties fairly quickly, especially now. The one thing I will say with construction rehabs is you want to do it during the time frame that, during the time that, you want to be doing your quiet title while you're getting the renovations done. Here's another project that was a bigger rehab. So this is a much bigger house, 3,000 square feet. And here's what we're doing on that one right now. So this one, actually we had to get licensed, brand new electrical throughout the whole house. We had to clean out one of the back rooms. There's actually the main structure of the house, but someone had done an addition where the roof was coming in a little bit and there's a hole in the roof. But overall, the main structure was very sound. Now it looked terrible. Like I actually, this is one of the rare cases where I actually went out to check on it. So, about 13 rehabs that were going on out there. Plus, we're prepping for the upcoming Arkansas auctions. So I actually went out there to this property, and it had like a dead possum in it and all kinds of fun stuff. And it looked terrible when you look at it. I mean, when you look at it initially, this was the area where there was a water damage in the back corner, and that looks terrible, but it's not necessarily always as costly as you think it is. Here's after we came in and started, fixing that, right? Where that one, there's one room, there was only one room in the whole house that had any issues. The whole rest of the house was completely sound as far as water issues, anything else. So it definitely needed still renovation. But you see this back corner of this addition here. That's the area that needed some full fixing. But this house we got for $20,000, and you can see for too long. Look at it; it just looks like brand new, right? Back to how it should have been. As they're changing the roof out on it, fixing everything up on it. Okay, now Once it's done, obviously it looks a lot better than it did, and matches the current roof, new electrical through the whole house all the way out, everything else. So right now they just finished up the inspections on the electrical because it did need brand new electrical in the house, was required by the city on this one. And that's ran across the board. So, but the rest of the house is in really good shape. And now you can see they've already started replacing some of the windows, sheetrock, everything else, is getting cleaned up. I don't know why that picture looked weird. But this one's moving right along. This is another one that'll be on the market probably 1st of September. And we bought it for 20,000, putting about 80,000 in renovation into it, and it'll sell on the market for about $350,000. So my question to you guys is, how many of those do you need to do a year to really be doing a little bit better, right? And if you're doing, a couple of those deals a year, you're making an extra two, three, 400, $500,000 a year. If you took those funds and put it into rental properties, like some of the things I was just showing you with the rentals, could some of these properties been rental properties? Sure. In this case, we're mostly flipping the properties because the market has such a demand for renovated properties right now that they're moving so fast. But could I have turned them into rentals? Sure. The numbers would have worked really well, especially on some of the smaller properties for rentals. Some of the properties we're only into for 5, 6 grand, put 15 into it, even for 20 grand, even if you're getting $1,000 a month, that's 12,000 a year on a $20,000 investment. And those properties are worth about 100 grand, 120 grand after they're done. So it's really close to the scenario that I just went through with you guys on rentals. But if you had an extra, 200, 300 grand coming in from fix and flips, and then you take all that money and you buy up 5, 6 rentals a year, what happens you do that over 3, 4, 5 years? And right now we're seeing an opportunity in the marketplace we haven't seen. There's a lot less competition at tax auctions this year than we've seen before, in the previous, last 6, 7 years. And so there's a lot of good stuff going on. And I'm going to turn it back over to Steve and Shade here in just a second. Um, and we can talk about some other things. I do see a good question that just popped up. Do we also pick up tax sale land deals? Definitely. You can definitely pick up land. On average, you get land for like 10 cents on the dollar. The thing with land, the target right now is you buy it cheap and sell it cheap. Because there's so many properties coming on the markets and all the markets has softened a little bit. Land also softens quite a bit. So if you want to move it fast, you got to sell it cheap. So we want to buy it for 10 cents on the dollar, sell it for 30 cents on the dollar to somebody else. Either way, you're still doubling your money. So it's a great deal. But yeah, I mean, some of the biggest land deals. I mean, I know we've got one property in Michigan we picked up for about a piece of commercial land for 27K and tax value on it's over $500,000. So there's lots of definitely land deals out there that make sense. And we've got tons and tons on our membership site and on our website, we've got tons and tons of examples of land deals across the board. So whether it's land or structures, I'll buy anything that's a deal. The reason why I like working on structures right now is it's cheaper to repair properties than it is to build new ones too. And typically with land, I wouldn't tell anyone to hold on to land right now. I'd just tell you to buy it cheap, sell it cheap, get rid of it, generate some capital, build it up. Once you have enough capital, right, or you've got a good enough passive income, then if you want to buy and hold land for long term, you can definitely look at doing that.